Hello everyone, and we are headed towards Saddleback Mountain. We've just taken a right turn and we're currently on Fountaindale Rd, having just come through the beautiful town of Jamberoo. We're about 75 kilometres into our ride, having started in Bowral in the Southern Highlands, about 110 kilometres southwest of Sydney. In order to get here, we took the Macquarie Pass descent into Albion Park, and then took a right hand turn towards Jamberoo. We're approaching Marcel doing his business. I'll tell you more about him later. Saddleback Mountain is west of Kiama, and from that direction the climb to the summit is a category 3 at 3.71 kilometers and an average gradient of 7%. That's Arn doing his last minute selfies. But from this direction, from Fountaindale Rd, it's a Cat 2 climb at 4.67 kilometers and an average gradient of 8%. We're on this stretch of road for another 600 meters to the base of the climb. To my left is Thomas. Now Thomas is the sadistic fella that recommended we do this climb in particular, and he's been trying to get us out here for over a year, and we've finally made it. Up ahead of me is my club teammate, the famous Johnny Pham in the Bankstown sports kit. Now if you think you've seen Johnny out and about riding, then you probably have, because he is everywhere. Okay, down this little dip, and we're approaching the start of the segment, which is right about now, into this left-hander. Now Marcel went straight, so don't do that, okay, especially if you're segment hunting.
Whoa, that looks steep, Daddy.
That was my son announcing the first section of this climb, and it is wickedly steep. And to give you a summary of how I saw this climb, it starts off with this very steep section, and then you get a little bit of relief before it pinches up again into another steep section, and then you've got about just over 2 kilometers of false flat at about 6% all the way to the gates. In this particular group of friends, we have Tech to my left, and then we have Mel, there's Pete, we have JP dancing on the pedals, Anders in front of him, Tony, we have Arn up ahead, Thomas is in between there somewhere, and Bart just went past us. I'm on my Cannondale Cat 12 today. It's my race bike, but it's also an excellent climbing bike as well. I'm running a semi-compact, so 5236 at the front and a 1130 cassette in the back. I'm currently on my lowest gear, and I know this because if you're running a Di2, it gives a beep, and that beep signals no more gears left, son, and it's time to toughen up. Taking a look down, and the gradient is creeping in excess of 20% gradient, and I'm starting to grind at just under 50 RPM. My heart rate is currently about 177 beats per minute, which puts me into zone 4, which for me is 171 to 190, and I probably want to keep it towards the lower end of this range for the rest of the climb. Looking ahead, we have a good example of contrasting styles. You've got Arn on the left, who is seated and will remain so for the entire climb, and you've got JP on the right, who is out of the saddle and off on his merry way. I'm somewhere in between, and I like to mix it up, so I'll climb seated, and I'll get out and out of the saddle for about 10 to 15 pedal strokes, and I'll sit back down again. I certainly don't consider myself as a climber. I can sprint a little and I can climb a little, so and the purpose of this video is not as a how to climb Mount Saddleback, and it's simply how I rode it on the day. You certainly have to be comfortable with what you've got and are capable of maintaining for in excess of 25 minutes and at a low RPM of about 50. At this point, I'm kind of distracted by the size and the placement of the bananas in the back of Aunt's jersey. You really didn't give it much thought. The road is starting to level off here and a little bit of respite, and it gives you a chance to pick up the cadence and to spin the lactic acid out and take a few deep breaths to drop that heart rate. And at this stage I feel like I'm flying, and then I look down and it's like, shit, I'm only going about 13 kilometers an hour. But it's a welcome change. That's Marcel, who's just whizzed past me. Now this guy is a very, very strong rider. He's probably putting out about 4.7 to 4.8 watts per kilogram, and he certainly maintains this the entire way to the top. In comparison, I climbed this at about 3.4 watts per kilo, and in that space of 4.5 kilometers, he's put like 6 minutes into my time. What's even more remarkable is he's doing it on an alloy frame, and the bike itself weighs about 12 kilograms, so you can just see how strong this boy is. Marcel's actually over here on a study visa, so he really should be studying right about now, but he's outside riding his bike all day with us, so money well spent, Mum and Dad. Yep, and surely enough, you can see the black rain clouds on the horizon, and shortly we are going to get rained on. So that was just another little pinch that we've just climbed, and we're in this section of the climb where it's the only time it gets to be actually flat, and there's a slight downhill, and after this point, yeah, it's all uphill. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward this little bit. That's a false flat. We're slowly catching up to Bart, who's just up ahead. Bart's just going at his own pace, and he's not really in any particular distress. As I say so, the fabulous Mel, who has just gone past me. Now Mel has pages and pages of QMs, and this is certainly a sight that us boys are used to by now. And that's Anders just along beside me. So I'm going to go ahead and fast forward the video to the next steep section of the climb, which happens around about halfway up the climb proper. Alright, here we go. So we're on the pinch now, and the thing is, if you can get past this next part, you've got about 2 kilometers of climb, which is relatively easy compared to what you've just been through until you hit the gates. Okay, so you can tick that sector off your list, and I'm going to go ahead and fast forward the video to just before the gates. But before I do so, I just wanted to make a comment on the actual road surface and the climb itself. As you can see, the road is actually very, very good, and or at least up until the gates. The climb itself is stunning, and you're shielded by plenty of tree cover, and I really enjoyed it. For those that are pre-cramping and twitching and lactic acids burning the thighs and gasping for air, your care factor is probably going to be about 0. But if you do have the fitness and you take a look around, it's a stunning climb. That's Stephen on my left, and we're about 700 meters until we reach the gates of the lookout. There's several ways of approaching Saddleback. The first option is to skip it completely and bypass it, and that's certainly no disrespect to people who choose this because it's a seriously difficult climb. You can get to the gates in one of 2 ways, via Kiama or via Fountaindale Rd, but personally to be considered to have done the full climb, you really need to go from the gates to the lookout. So to give you an idea of some of the numbers, at the time of recording, just over 2,000 people have made it to the gates, and that's in either direction. 470 of those 2,000 actually went on from the gates to the lookout, so that's roughly 23%. So basically the other 77% got to the gates, took one look up and said, yeah, nah, maybe some other time. And you'll see why in a minute. So I'm just going to go ahead and fast forward this little bit and stop just before the climb. We're just about to take the sharp right-hander through the gates of Mordor to the lookout. At this point, you really need to have committed 100% to the final climb, because if you're still debating amongst yourselves or with yourself whether you should or shouldn't go, and you get to this point and you see someone like Bart on the side of the road who takes a look at you and says, "You don't want to go up there, fellas," well, you're probably not going to make it. Having said that, Bart has done this climb before, and today he decided not to go up. So you can see there are a few potholes along this final segment, and the road surface is not the best, but right now I'm more focused on my breathing, putting a constant power down, and actually keeping the front wheel on the ground, because it did have a tendency to want to lift, especially when I was seated. It's also the first time I'm trying this zigzag method of climbing. I don't actually know if I'm going faster or slower, but it did take the gradient away just that little bit, and it gave my mind something else to concentrate on. This fine specimen ahead of me is my mate Paul, who's bossing his way up on his titanium bike. He's doing weight training today, so he's taking the heavier bike. But Paul is a very strong rider, and he's finished the peaks multiple times. I've actually lost track of how many peaks he's finished, but you can see here we're both having a very hard time getting up this final pinch. And the summit is just ahead. You can actually see it from a long way down, and that's a good thing because it gives you something to focus on, and you know that there is an end in sight, as opposed to having a blind corner and you not knowing when this climb is going to end. You can see that the gradient is headed towards 30%, and this is the hardest part of the sector. It's important to not panic, but also not to get a rush of blood and try to sprint to the top, because you'll probably blow up.
Fucking hell!
And that is Saddleback Mountain. I don't know where this segment ends, so I thought I'd just go all the way to the end just to make sure. I want to finish up with a few points regarding Saddleback, and one in particular is if you're a recreational rider and you're out for a cruise, then this is probably not the place you want to visit, because you probably end up doing some sort of damage to yourself. It is seriously steep. It's certainly one of the hardest climbs I've ever done, if not the hardest, and it's hard on your back, it's hard on your neck, it's hard on your knees, it's basically hard on every part of your body. That's Paul rolling past me. And also, this is certainly not the place you want to be visiting if you have arthritis, if you have a hernia, if you've had recent sutures put in, because the serious pain face that you'll be pulling, you probably burst something. This last part here is the descent, and it is seriously steep. It is hard on your brakes, it is hard on your hands and fingers, and there's always a little bit of loose gravel here, so you need to be careful when you're descending. And that is it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video.